Morning, guys. Today, here's my doggy. Today is Wednesday. Can you believe it? And we just have 2 more days of Fahrenheit, and then you will be starting a new unit. So today and tomorrow I'll read, and then Friday you're going to have a quiz, and then next week we'll start Spoon River Anthology. So I'm going to go ahead and start today, 138 to 147. So Montag has just found the railroad tracks where Faber said there should be a lot of Yale and Harvard graduates living along the railroad tracks, kind of living off the grid, I guess you would say. So today he's going to meet some of those people. So here we go. Half an hour later, cold and moving carefully on the tracks, fully aware of his entire body, his face, his mouth, his eyes stuffed with blackness, his ears stuffed with sound, his legs prickled with burrs and nettles, he saw the fire ahead. The fire was gone, and then it was back again like a winking eye. He stopped, afraid he would blow the fire out with a single breath, but the fire was there, and he approached it warily, from a long way off. It took the better part of 15 minutes before he drew away very close indeed to it. And then he stood looking at it from the cover. That small motion, the white and red color, a strange fire because it meant a different thing to him. It was not burning, it was warming. He saw many hands held to its warmth, hands without arms hidden in darkness. Above the hands, motionless faces that were only moved and tossed and flickered with the firelight. He hadn't known fire could look this way. He had never thought in his life that it could give as well as take. Even its smell was different. How long he stood, he did not know. But there was a foolish and yet delicious sense of knowing himself as an animal come from the forest, drawn by the fire. He was a thing of brush and liquid eye, of fur and muzzle and hoof. He was a thing of horn and blood that would smell like autumn if you bled it out on the ground. He stood a long, long time listening to the warm crackle of the flames. There was a silence gathered all about the fire, and the silence was in the men's faces, and the time was there, time enough to sit by this rusting track under the trees and look at the world and turn it over with the eyes, as if it were held to the center of the bonfire, a piece of steel. These men were all shaping. It was not only the fire that was different, it was the silence. Montag moved towards this special silence that was concerned with all of the world. And then the voices began, and they were talking, and he could hear nothing of what the voices said, but the sound rose and fell quietly, and the voices were turning the world over, looking at it. The voices knew the land and the trees and the city which lay down the track by the river. The voices talked of everything. There was nothing they could not talk about, he knew, from the very canvas and motion and continual stir of curiosity and wonder in them. And then one of the men looked up and saw him, for the first or perhaps the 7th time, and a voice called to Montag, "All right, you can come on out now." Montag stepped back in the shadows. "It's all right," the voice said. "You're welcome here." Montag walked slowly towards the fire, and the 5 old men sitting there dressed in dark blue denim pants and jackets and dark blue shirts. He did not know what to say to them. "Sit down," said the man who seemed to be the leader of the small group. "Have some coffee." He watched the dark, steaming mixture pour into a collapsible tin cup, which was handed to him straight off. He sipped it gingerly and felt them looking at him curiously and with curiosity. His lips were scalded, but that was good. The faces around him were bearded, but the beards were clean. They were neat, and their hands were clean. They all stood up as if to welcome a guest, and now they sat down again. Montag sipped. "Thanks," he said. "Thanks very much." "You're welcome, Montag. My name's Granger." He held out a small bottle of colorless fluid. "Drink this," he said. "Or drink this, too. It'll change the chemical index of your perspiration. Half an hour from now, you'll smell like two other people. With the hound after you, the best thing is bottoms up." Montag drank the bitter liquid. "You'll stink like a bobcat, but that's all right," said Granger. "You know my name?" Montag said. Granger nodded to a portable battery TV that sat by the fire. "We watched the chase. Figured you'd wind up south along the river. When we heard you plunging around in the forest like a drunken elk, we didn't hide as we usually do. We figured you were in the river when the helicopter camera swung back over the city. Something funny there. The chase is still running. The other way, though." "The other way? Let's have a look." Granger snapped the portable viewer on. The picture was nightmare, condensed, easily passed from hand to hand. In the forest, all whirling color and flight. A voice cried, "The chase continues north in the city. Police helicopters are converging on Avenue 87th and Elm Grove Park." Granger nodded. "They're faking. You threw them off at the river. They can't admit it. They know they can hold their audience only so long. The show's got to have a snap ending. Quick. If they started searching the whole damn river, it might take them all night. So they're sniffing for a scapegoat to end things with a bang. Watch. They'll catch Montag in the next 5 minutes." "But how?" "Watch." The camera, hovering in the belly of the helicopter, now swung down in an empty street. "See that?" whispered Granger. "It'll be you. Right up at the end of that street is our victim. See how our camera's coming in? Building a scene, suspense, long shot. Right now, some poor fella's out for a walk. A rarity, an odd one. Don't think the police don't know the habits of the queer ducks like that. Men who walk mornings for the hell of it, and for some reason other than insomnia. Anyway, the police have had him charted for months, maybe years. Never knew when this sort of information might be handy. And today, it turns out, it's very usable indeed. It saves face. Oh God, look there." The men at the fire bent forward. On the screen, a man turned a corner. A mechanical hound rushed forward into the viewer suddenly. The helicopter's lights shot down a dozen brilliant pillars that built a cage all around the man. The voice cried, "That's Montag! The search is done!" The innocent man stood bewildered, a cigarette burning in his hand. He stared at the hound, not knowing what it was. He probably never knew. He glanced up at the sky and the whirling sirens. The camera rushed down. The hound leapt into the air with a rhythm and a sense of timing that was incredibly beautiful. Its needle shot out. It was suspended for a moment in their gaze, as if to give the vast audience time to appreciate everything. The raw look at the victim's face, the empty street, the steel animal, a bullet nosing the target. "Montag, don't move," said a voice from the sky. The camera fell upon the victim, even as did the hound. Both reached him simultaneously. The victim was seized by the hound, and the camera in a great spidering, clenching grip. He screamed, and he screamed, and he screamed. Blackout. Silence. Darkness. Montag cried out in silence and turned away. Silence. So if you're a little confused here, when they lost Montag in the river at the helicopter, they knew the government and the police and the news stations knew they needed to find Montag quick, because they only have the audience's attention for a couple minutes. So they whirled back around into the city, and they just pretended they found Montag because they knew there was another guy out for a walk. The police had been watching for a while anyway, and they figured that if they could just use him as Montag, then it would all be over. Everybody could go back to their regularly scheduled programs, and everything would be wonderful. So that's what they did. It's funny how it's less about catching the bad guy and more about the chase and people seeing that someone's caught so they can move on and enjoy their time. So to the police, Montag wasn't as much of a threat as they showed, I guess. And in the end, it was funny because they just needed to find somebody to calm everyone's fears so everybody could go back to enjoying life. Like, you know, their attention span was so short. They needed to just find somebody, pin it on them, and move on. So now everybody thinks Montag's dead. And then, after a time of the men sitting around the fire, their faces expressionless, an announcer on the dark screen said, "The search is over. Montag is dead. Crime against society has been avenged." Darkness. "We now take you to the Sky Room for the Hotel Lux for a half hour of Just Before Dawn, a program of..." Granger turned it off. They didn't show the man's face in focus. Did you notice? Even your best friends couldn't tell that it wasn't you. They scrambled it just enough to let the imagination take over. "Hell," he whispered. "Hell." Montag said nothing, but now, looking back, sat with his eyes fixed to the black screen, trembling. Granger touched Montag's arm. "Welcome back from the dead." Montag nodded. Granger went on. "Might as well know all of us now. This is Fred Clampett, former occupant of the Thomas Hardy Chair of Cambridge at the year before it became a atomic engineering school. This over here is Dr. Simmons from UCLA, a specialist in Ortega y Gasset. Professor West here did quite a bit for ethics and ancient study now, for Columbia University quite some years ago. Reverend Padover here gave a few lectures 30 years ago and lost his flock between one Sunday and the next for his views. He's been bumming with us ever since. Myself, I wrote a book called Fingers in the Glove, the proper relationship between the individual and the society. And here I am. Welcome, Montag." "I don't belong with you," said Montag at last, slowly. "I've been an idiot all the way." "Yeah, honey." "I know. I've got to read the book for the kids this morning. I'm sorry. You go back to bed. It's 4 a.m. Okay?
It's actually 5.
Well, it just turned 5. Sorry, honey. I got to read.
No, you're fine.
Okay. I love you. Why don't you go back to bed, okay?
I always wake up at 5.
I know you do, you crazy kid. Okay. Sorry. Love you. You're okay. I'm fine, bud. We're used to that. We all made the right kind of mistakes and wouldn't be here, or we wouldn't be here. When we were separate individuals, all we had was rage. I struck a fireman when he came to burn my library years ago. I've been running ever since. You want to join us, Montag? Yes. What have you to offer? Nothing. I thought I had part of the book of Ecclesiastes and maybe a little of Revelations, but I hadn't even that now. The book of Ecclesiastes would be fine. Where was it? Here? Montag touched his head. Ah. Granger smiled and nodded. "What's wrong? Isn't that all right?" said Montag. "Better than all right. It's perfect." Granger turned to the Reverend. "Do we have a book of Ecclesiastes?" "One, a man named Harris in Youngstown." "Montag?" Granger took Montag's shoulder firmly. "Walk carefully. Guard your health. If anything that should happen to Harris, you are the book of Ecclesiastes. See how important you become in the last minute?" "But I've forgotten." "No, nothing's ever lost. We have ways to shake down your clinker for you." "But I've tried to remember." "Don't try. It'll come when we need it. All of us have photographic memories, but spend a lifetime learning how to block off the things that aren't really in there. Simmons here has worked on it for 20 years, and now we've got the method down to where we can recall anything that's ever been read once. Would you like some, Montag, to read Plato's Republic?" "Well, of course. I am Plato's Republic. Like to read Marcus Aurelius? Mr. Simmons is Marcus." "How do you do?" said Mr. Simmons. Hello, said Montag. I want you to meet Jonathan Swift, the author of that evil political book, Gulliver's Travels. And this fellow over here, Charles Darwin. And this over here, Schopenhauer. And this one is Einstein. And this one here at the elbow is Mr. Albert Schweitzer, a very kind philosopher indeed. Here we all are, Montag. Episcopines, and Mahatma Gandhi, and Gautama Buddha, and Confucius, and Thomas Love Peacock, and Thomas Jefferson, and Mr. Lincoln, if you please. We are also Matthew, and Mark, and Luke, and John. So these guys memorize books because they can't keep them forever, and they can't travel with them. And one of the professors has found a way to memorize quickly and has taught the other men that you can read a book just once and memorize it. So essentially these men are walking books, and the only thing that Montag has to offer is the book of Ecclesiastes, which is essentially the book in the Bible about rebirth. If you guys ever hear for everything there is a season under heaven, a time to live and a time to die, a time to be born, that kind of thing. So Ecclesiastes is change from ignorance and book burning in general, but the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible is all about rebirth, a time to reap and a time to sow, a time, it's like this whole list. And then there's also this song from the 60s that sings it, which is like the most beautiful song ever. I'm going to link it in the Google Classroom today because I always play it when you guys come in, and it's one of my favorite songs because I always talk about how there's different seasons in your life, and some seasons are easier than others, and I think that some people forget when they're in a bad season that it's just a season. So that's one big part of the book of Ecclesiastes. So it's really poetic and powerful that Ray Bradbury makes Montag, has Montag memorizing the book of Ecclesiastes, the book of rebirth, because he is in a rebirth. I love it. I get so excited about it. Okay. Everyone laughed quietly. But it can't be, said Montag. It is, replied Granger, smiling. We're books burners, too. We read the books and burn them, afraid they'd be found. Microfilming didn't pay off, and we were always traveling. We didn't want to bury the film and come back later. Always a chance of discovery. Better to keep it in the old heads where no one can see it or suspect it. We are all bits and pieces of history and literature and international law. Byron and Thomas Paine and Machiavelli or Christ. It's here. And the hour's late and the war's begun. And we are out here, and the city is out there, all wrapped up in its own coat of 1,000 colors. What do you think, Montag? I think I was blind trying to go at things my own way, planting books in firemen's houses and sending in alarms. You do what you gotta do. Carried out on a national scale, it might have worked beautifully. But our way is simpler, and we think better. All we want to do is keep the knowledge we think we will need intact and safe. We're not out to incite any anger anyone yet. For if we are destroyed, the knowledge is dead, perhaps for good. We are model citizens in our own special way. We walk the old tracks, we lie in the hills at night, the city people let us be. We're stopped and searched occasionally, but there's nothing on our person to incriminate us. The organization's flexible, very loose and fragmentary. Some of us have had plastic surgery on our faces and our fingertips. Right now, we have a horrible job. We're waiting for the war to begin and as quickly end. It's not pleasant, but then we're not in control. We're the odd minority crying in the wilderness. When the war's over, perhaps we can be some use to the world. Do you really think they'll listen then? If not, we'll just have to wait. We'll pass the book on to our children by the word of mouth and let our children wait in turn on the other people. A lot will be lost that way, of course, but you can't make people listen. They have to come around in their own time, wondering what would happen, wondering what would have happened and why the world blew up under them. It can't last. Well, how many of you are there? Thousands on the roads, the abandoned railroad tracks, tonight, bums on the outside, libraries on the inside. It wasn't planned at first. Each man had a book he had wanted to remember and did. Then over a period of 20 years or so, we met each other, traveling, and got the loose network together and set out on a plan. The most important single thing we have pounded into our heads is that we are not important. We mustn't be pedants. We were not to feel superior to anyone in the world. We're nothing more than dust jackets and books, of no significance otherwise. Some of us live in small towns. Chapter 1 of Thoreau's Walden and Green River. Chapter 2 in Willow Farm, Maine. Why, there's no one town in Maryland. There's one town in Maryland, only 27 people. No bomb will ever touch that town. And it is the complete essay of man named Bernard Russell. Pick up that town almost. Flip the pages, so many pages to a person. And when the war's over, someday, some year, the books can be written again, and the people will be called in, one by one, to recite what they know. And we'll set it all up in type until another dark age, when we might have to do the whole damn thing over again. But that's the wonderful thing about man. We never get so discouraged or disgusted that he gives up doing it all over again, because he knows very well it is important and worth the doing. "What do we do tonight?" asked Montague. "We wait," said Granger, "and move downstream a little ways, just in case." He began throwing dust and dirt in the fire. The other men helped, and Montague helped in the wilderness. The men all moved their hands, putting out the fire together. Love, love, love. So we are going to finish tomorrow, and we're going to look at the book of Ecclesiastes. Today you have a discussion board, I believe, that Mrs. A put together for you. Don't judge my pajama pants. And I'll go ahead and link that song. It's called Turn, and I think it's by the Birds. But I want you guys to listen to it today so that tomorrow we can look at that section of Ecclesiastes that Montague's going to be discussing about everything having a season under heaven. And just continuing to remember there's a lot of powerful symbolism and things to be learned in this book, especially during this time. Man never gives up because they know it's worth redoing. So I hope you guys have a great day today. It's snowing right now. I'm going to go run in about an hour. And so it's going to be interesting because I got a sunburn last week. And this week it's snowing. Yay! All right, I will see you soon. Can't wait to hear from you. Have a good day, guys.